Okay, everybody will get started now. Hello everyone. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our panel on driving climate action through entrepreneurship. This has been organized as part of the wider Green Careers Festival happening over the past couple of weeks. So startups can play a vital role in tackling the climate crisis by developing innovative solutions to a wide variety of climate challenges. And there's been a tremendous growth in this space over the past few years. Today we're joined by three incredible panelists, Coleridge, Joyeeta, and Hodgkinson, to explore this space a bit more. The panel will be followed by a dinner. So thank you to everyone who's applied to join it. If you've been able to secure a place, you should have received a confirmation email about that by now. I'll start the panel by introducing our speakers and then ask them a few questions before moving on to questions from the audience and then a final closing question from me. Our first speaker is Coleridge. Chris is the founder of Faster Climate Impact, an ecosystem builder for the climate tech space, and Carbon 13, a venture builder for the climate tech space. He is also an associate professor in strategy and entrepreneurship management practice at the Judge Business School. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. Next, we have Joyeeta. Joyeeta is the CEO and co-founder of Samudra Oceans, a startup automating seaweed farming using robotics and AI. She has previously founded and worked with multiple startups and holds an entrepreneurship-focused MBA from Oxford. She is also an advisor to the UK Innovation and Science Seed Fund. Finally, we have Hodgkinson. Luth is the CEO and founder of Adia, a startup working to decarbonise the most difficult buildings in the world using AI and smart devices. Luth previously worked at ENGIE Energy Access Africa, an organization opening access to clean energy through off-grid, PAYGo solar and mini-grid solutions, impacting over 10 million lives across Africa. To get us started, can you tell us about your current work and your current product that you're developing and how that's relevant to the climate? Also, what's your professional journey been and how did you end up working in the climate entrepreneurship space?
Excellent. That will take an hour, so then we'll be out of time. Trying to keep it brief. I'm part of the Greta generation of people converting to sustainability. I've been teaching entrepreneurship and strategic management for a long time. I was an entrepreneur as a young man, but what that means is before the internet. So it's not, the skills I picked up then are a little past it, right? I was getting itchy about how much impact I was able to have as a lecturer directly. So I went to the Dean of the Business School and I asked for permission to found a venture builder on the side of the day job, which was Carbon 13. And the idea of Carbon 13 was to bring together technologists and commercial people to found teams to go and tackle the many problems that we have that need solving if we're going to decarbonize this world. Right? To do that, we need many shots on goal. We're incredible as a species. We're incredibly bad at predicting the future of technology. We can say things about what's going to happen next year that will turn out to be ridiculous and untrue in the event, and certainly projecting what's going to happen 10 years out or 30 years out, as the UK 6th carbon budget tries to do, is a fruitless exercise. So we need a wave of innovation. We need a lot of people working to harness technology and diffuse it around the world very quickly, using the one available mechanism that we have for that, which is sort of high growth, high impact entrepreneurship. Between September 2021 and now, Carbon 13 has made 64 pre-seed investments in climate tech startups, which is maybe about 4 or 5% of the pre-seed deals that were done in the UK during that in climate tech during that time. So it's been a presence in the space. In about a year ago, we started a major expansion. We opened in Berlin in April. When a startup that was started by a part-time founder like me, who has a full-time job in academia, starts to grow, then that founder knows that the writing is on the wall, and you're going to have to step back in favor of a full-time CEO, and so that happened in July. I'm now working on Faster Climate Impact, and I feel I'm already taking up too much time, but I'll speak very briefly about that. The basic insight is that when the venture capital industry started really growing in the digital age, right? It's founded on Moore's law, right? It's founded on an idea that, all software products, all digital, all computing basically is accelerating and improving at an astonishing rate, right? There's never been any other technology in the history of the world that improves as fast as Moore's, as the digital technologies that are affected by Moore's law. Every technology improves, right? If it's out in the market and it's generating cash, then you can get investors to put money in to help create the next generation of that of that technology. But technologies that are not digital, that are not relying on semiconductors, don't improve in nearly as fast a way, right? And that means in order to make fast progress in technology areas that are not fundamentally digital, you have to be more creative about bringing chains of technologies together to do systems change, right? If I give you a very simple example of what I'm talking about, you could look at Tesla, right? And Tesla, by the way, is not the perfect green story by any means, right? But Tesla, the Tesla Roadster is a pretty boring assembly of standard technologies. What really sets Tesla apart is the decision to buy a battery company and a materials company and to bolt them together and to drive the technology trajectory faster in those materials science areas, so that Tesla's battery technology just leaps ahead of what the competitors can hope to achieve, right? And this is a really important. This kind of integration of different technologies is a really important step in the process of bringing these technologies to life, because if you just let each modular bit of the chain kind of accelerate at its own rate, and like they should find each other and so on, that can work, and it works very well in the digital space, but it doesn't lead to accelerated capital formation, right? You just have a lot of experiments, and then eventually those experiments coalesce in some interesting way, and people start throwing money at it, right? In order to accelerate things, you need to bring forward the point where you've got the technologies working together. And the most recent example of this is H2 Green Steel, right? H2 Green Steel is, has raised 6 billion euros over the last 12 months, and it is fundamentally private equity guys getting together and saying, if we get this technology with this technology, with this technology, with this technology, with this technology, and there's about 15 different technologies that have never been tried together before in that chain, and you get them all working together, then you've got something that's really robust and able to make fast progress, right? So Faster Climate Impact is looking for opportunities to do a similar integration job in energy storage, in waste, possibly in built environment software, and basically raise a fund of a few $100 million to go out and do this integration, this integration job. Right, that's enough about me.
Thank you for this.
Sorry, I feel I've gone into lecturing mode, and I apologize.
That was fascinating. Thank you, Joyeeta.
I do wear two hats. I'll cover my minor hat quickly, just because I'm a silent partner in a few funds. I'm also an investor. I am a partner at Maroon Invest, which is a 150 million fund. We invest in VCs, so we're LPs that work in climate tech. So, so LPs to VCs. And then I'm also a partner, I sit on the investment committee of UKI2S. It is an evergreen government fund which invests in things like quantum and atomic, so really, really high-risk deep science businesses. It's beyond deep tech. We invest in deep science. And I'm also in Future Planet Capital. But other than that, other than the investor hat, which is a bit silent, I do it like 10% of my time for the last few years. 90% of the time I'm an operator. By operator, I mean being an entrepreneur. My background is in electronics engineering and applied physics. So it was actually a very, very exciting career, and I was absolutely very happy being an engineer. I don't think I ever wanted to be an entrepreneur, and at least never sat in these chairs where you are today. So I'm very, very jealous of you. I actually thought I loved being an engineer and nothing else matters. That was me. But I kind of accidentally ended up being an entrepreneur, as in, it's a long story, but ended up finding a deep tech company where I wasn't the CEO, I was the CTO. That had a very quick exit, and everybody was like, why don't you be the CEO next time? And I was like, I'm not gonna be CEO? And they were like, yes, you can. And I was like, no. And they were like, yes, you can. I was like, okay, I'll try. And that worked out very quickly. Had a 2-year exit. So I was like, whoa, I can do this stuff. Sorry, I'm trying to mind my language. And then I decided to ended up being like an entrepreneur full time. I was like, okay, time to embrace the truth. I'm probably better entrepreneur than engineer. Really hurt my ego because I thought I was a better engineer, but ended up being an entrepreneur. And now I'm obsessed. That's pretty much what I am. About my current venture, Samudra, Samudra is Sanskrit for ocean, so that's what we do. My company is entirely engineering. There is an AI piece, very small R&D and extremely deep artificial intelligence, but everything else is hardcore engineering. So it is an engineering company. So we are basically automating sea farms that are 10 to 20 kilometers away from shore. They're offshore and they're big, and seaweed captures a lot of carbon out of the air. So we try to automate that, and we try to automate that with as less carbon as possible. So our robots are designed to operate over multiple hectares at a time. And they are recycled every 3 to 5 years, at least that's the hope. So anyway, the whole thing is built in a way that it's quite carbon negative and ends up growing a lot more seaweed and taking out a lot more carbon than it adds to the world. That's the thesis. We are currently doing pretty well. I think we have over 10 farms, a couple in Scotland, 3 in Jamaica, few in Southeast England. We acquired a company from Jamaica to operate for us in Jamaica, Key Farms, and we acquired a company in Cornwall, Cornish Seaweed, that is actually working for us here. Why did we acquire companies? Kind of very similar to what you mentioned. We are engineers who we can build things that go out and get stuff done. But we need people who are marine biologists who live on site and operate the farm. Because even though the robots are out there, you need to go check out now and then and debug and see everything's okay. So our engineers aren't always people who are going to drop their lives in Oxford or London and go live in Haiti for 1 year. So we also need local teams that will do that, which is great because that's creating an outstanding amount of blue and white collar employment in very underdeveloped regions of the Caribbean. This is why we're also funded by World Bank and a few other subsidiaries we're trying to work with. Well, I shouldn't say funded, we're going to be. These are not necessarily directly World Bank, but they're subsidiaries that are banks that are incentivized to fund organizations that can create employment in areas that are very hit by the climate crisis, which is exactly where we operate. So it's kind of win-win on a both humanitarian and a climate angle. The third fun thing I can tell you about is we have legit reasons to work on the beach. We're on the beach all the time, but most of the time we're in the beach in a very cold part of the world, so it's not fun. It's 5mm wetsuit. If you're not a very good diver, you will likely die in the North Sea. Half of my engineers are probably pro sailors or divers, but that's kind of how we operate. It's mostly a lot of ocean-loving people who decided to focus on blue carbon and built an engineering solution, and now we are scaling that across the world. That's pretty much it. And we are almost always looking for people. So if you want to start your career being somewhere else before you become an entrepreneur, always happy to talk.
Thank you so much, Joyeeta, and that's a really interesting journey of how you almost accidentally became an entrepreneur. All right, finally, Luke.
Thank you. I did a philosophy degree and never thought I would be an entrepreneur at all, actually.
That surprises me.
Yeah, I fell into the software scene in London working for startups straight out of uni, and in a product role mostly, worked kind of between engineering and the business always, and was able to translate the requirements between them. And I was living on a narrowboat and working in a fintech startup when I got a job offer to work in Kampala, Uganda for a company doing rooftop solar, pay-as-you-go rooftop solar, which seemed like the perfect mix of fintech and renewables for my off-grid lifestyle. I dropped everything and moved out there and led product development for them over the course of 4 years initially. Led the development of a pay-as-you-go solar home system, which was modular, designed to work in rural households. Very small systems replacing kerosene and candles, and with mobile payments that customers can take it home for a very small deposit and then pay it off over 2 or 3 years. So there's quite a lot of innovation around understanding the customers' financial lives. And we actually sold that business to ENGIE in 2018. So I think at the time it was the only acquisition in the industry, the first acquisition in the solar, PAYGo solar space. Really interesting experience to go through that and the integration with a 180,000 employee company, having grown from 50 employees with Phoenix. And then I moved to Mozambique to build a subsidiary for ENGIE. I tried to stay as far away from the bureaucracy of that company as possible, and mostly succeeded. Built the subsidiary from 0 to 200 people, and had a lot of fun selling the product that I'd actually led the design on. I think that's quite a unique experience. And after scaling that, bringing it to profitability, I decided to move back to the UK to actually work on something more climate focused. I think the old CEO of Phoenix doesn't like me saying this, but I joined it for a people impact. I think when you're looking at rooftop solar in Africa, you're offsetting a candle a day or maybe a litre of kerosene a month. It's not really going to move the needle on 1.5 degrees. And moved back to the UK to work in a more climate space and joined the Carbon 13 Accelerator for that reason.
So did I.
Which is where I met. Yeah, exactly. No, it was really, really impactful for me. I had thought of going to do a master's in climate science. I got into Columbia and turned it down and just did this instead, and no regrets. And in terms of Adia, what we built and where we've come from Carbon 13, I think it was part of the reason that I ended up on Adia, and I think the other two co-founders from Carbon 13 may have had their own reasons, but was the requirement of Carbon 13 to have a business that would avoid 10 million tonnes or more within 10 years. And I had no idea what I wanted to do going into it, but home heating was just such a low-hanging fruit. Gas boilers are responsible for 15% of greenhouse gas emissions across Europe, the UK and Europe. And when you're trying to hit that carbon case, it was just like, oh, well, that'll be easy. Let's look at that, especially when you consider we have had a solution for decarbonising home heating for 30 or 40 years, which is heat pumps. They've been used in Scandinavia all this time. Yeah. We just struggle to integrate them with old buildings, which make up the 80% of the housing stock in the UK and Europe. And they're not being replaced anytime soon. So our approach was really to just look at the problem, which is, well, why do we struggle to integrate them? How do we solve it now? The way that we solve it now is with a 2 to 4 month process of doing all this insulation, which completely precludes the majority of the market that don't plan replacing their heating source. 70% of boilers are replaced when they break down, so you can't wait 2 to 4 months. So we designed a product that would allow you to install a heat pump in 3 days in basically any home. Using AI would get the performance up to similar to a gas boiler, so your bills don't go up. And then you can make all these changes to your home afterwards and reap the rewards of efficiency, but really trying to just speed up that adoption. And we're pretty early on in our journey. We're about six months in. We've got product working, which is great. And we've closed our pre-seed just before Christmas. And now we're expanding. So also, likewise, if anyone's interested in that journey,
it's a shameless plug-in from both of us. I'm competing with you now. So
we're both looking for AI engineers. So.
Can I send both of you my CV then?
Please.
I'm hiring for everything. There's AI, there's divers, sailors, engineers, admin, MBA, everybody.
And thank you so much for that, Luth. It's really interesting that you had the startup experience both in Africa and back here. So and I'll try to pick up on that later on. So all of you have been either founded startups or involved in startups in some or the other capacity for a very long time in your career. So I just wanted to ask, how has running a climate tech startup or being involved in the climate tech space been different from just entrepreneurship or startups generally? Are there any specific challenges or any specific specific challenges or any specific perks that come with working in the space?
Yeah, I can take that. Mm-hmm. So climate tech, interestingly, is not a tech. It's horizontal. It cuts across multiple sectors and tech. You could be climate tech in property. We're doing climate tech in nature and blue carbon. You could be doing climate tech in consumer behavior to nudge them to be greener, which is an entirely UI experience-based thing. You could be climate tech by, introducing a new kind of food technology. Climate tech is not actually a tech. It's a horizontal line that cuts across every tech and every skill set. So I would personally say, for me, the interesting thing to learn, which is good news for everybody here, is I personally, having done it quite a few times, I still find that climate tech has entrepreneurship itself is a bit of, there's not really much of a role. There is a bit, but not that much compared to others. But climate tech has actually far less of a blueprint. There's less investors, which is not great news, but there's very few of them. And there's not that much capital floating around for the most important thing on the planet, which is how stupid we are. But also, as a species, repeatedly, right? But also, in general, it just means that you're working in a horizontal slice in a less understood sector with highly limited capital, and being entrepreneur in that. It basically means that if there was no rule book before, there's not even a printing press now that will make a book for a long time. So I would say there's no disadvantage of anyone starting and trying, because we're all kind of on the same ground. There's no great advantage. Even if I come in as a very experienced entrepreneur, the truth is there's not that much of an advantage. I'm pretty much on the same ground as someone else who starts. So it's actually great that we are all kind of starting from ground zero. That's my thought. I think there's a little bit I have taken from my old ventures, but that's a personal development rather than the exact playbook. It's who I am as a leader, what I've learned about growing organizations, what I've learned about people that I try to transpose, but not so much of a playbook per se, in my opinion. Could be different for Luke. What do you think?
No, I agree, and I think that most climate tech startups will at times call themselves climate tech and at times call themselves something else, depending on which investors and which customers they're speaking to. Because fundamentally there are, of course, climate tech investors that only invest in those spaces, but they're not always the ones with the most money or the ones that are going to unlock industries for you. So you've always got to have those two hats on.
Yeah. There's a beautiful there's a McKinsey study which shows it's a 2x2 matrix showing what's the level of startup investing that's going into different spaces and what's the potential decarbonizing impact of that space. And everything is clustered in the mature technologies with low decarbonization potential space in terms of what's actually receiving investment. So there's no evidence at the moment that there is a large number of investors who are investing on a decarbonization thesis, right? Where this, there are plenty who will talk about it, right? But there are not that many who will say, yeah, my thesis is the world is going to start paying for decarbonization really, really, really soon, right? We see a lot of startups where it's, the founders want to do decarbonization, the founders want to do climate tech, the mission of the organization, the vision of the founders is very focused on that, but And it's very reasonable to think that companies that are as early as what you guys are working on are going to, at some point in the coming years, catch a wave of investors saying, okay, now we believe that the incentives are really actually not just potential, but actual, and we're going to start driving money into those spaces. But right now, startups are having to say, well, we solve another problem, which brings cost benefits or brings increased revenues or whatever it is that the customer wants, and we also have a decarbonizing impact as well, and that brings ancillary benefits in terms of driving the project forward, but not directly, not in any major way directly pulling investors investment in.
The only thing I'll add here is unless you end up becoming a pure carbon credits company, where your financial incentives and carbon incentives are completely aligned, or green bond, or there are various forms of doing this, not just credits. You can be voluntary carbon market, you can be compliance, there are various types, and you can Google them up. There's not much there, 4 types. But you can pick like a type of thesis like that where your financial and carbon incentives are aligned, which is what we did, because we didn't want to have ancillary benefits. We tried it for the first few months and then it was too much of a headache for me. I'm a super streamlined person. I was like, let's just do one thing that does both. So we are more or less a blue carbon company. So what we make money for is removing carbon, which is also what the heart of the company is. And so we align both. It does make you very niche. And UK isn't the best place for it. US is still better. So our bias for blue carbon as well as a bit of investment is mostly San Fran, which is thanks to my last background. So maybe that's the advantage that you mentioned because I was in the Valley before. But in UK, carbon credit company being that is not very common. And the reason for that is also a bit policy related. And yesterday I was in some policy webinars with also the HSBC head of carbon and a few others. And they all mentioned the reason you don't have a lot of carbon credit companies in UK is one, you don't have a marketplace here. Everyone has to register with the US marketplaces. The second reason is UK as a country has already committed to the 2050 decarbonization, right? So their point is like there's no additionality to offset on top of that. Like we're going to get that done anyway, whether it's at the source or whatever. See what I mean? Like insetting rather than anything else. So their point is like, yeah, I know it's stupid. You're going to have to do both. They'll realize it in 5 years, a bit late to the party. But that's the take. So it's not probably the best place right now, but it will be in a couple of years. And you can't just start overnight. So it's good to start today, because in 18 to 36 months, it will be very mature and you can hit the ground running. And the good thing is, because carbon credits are a global market, we found that we could already sell. So we are selling to the US market. Fulfilling them anywhere in the world doesn't matter. We're fulfilling them here, Jamaica, India, Sri Lanka, probably looking at Oman next year. But their buyers are in US, which is fine. It's a global offset. So if you have that kind of a company, you can probably align both the incentives. But it's really hard to do, to come up with a thesis like that. And in all sectors, it may not even be possible. So it's highly needed that you find an ancillary benefit, and then this is also a benefit. It's sad. It should be the other way around in the world, isn't it? But that's where it's at.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, I will take the questions later on. I was going to ask about investors, but I think we've covered that. I think Luke, you briefly touched on customers as well. So I wanted to go into how did you go about kind of acquiring your first customer, and then acquire it, and then get into product market fit?
Sure. Well, I'll be very honest that Adia is still pre-revenue and pre our first customer. The way we've identified our route to market, I think, it was more strategic than just looking at the benefits. So we realized that our product has really deep benefits to a homeowner in the long run, allowing them to generate insights into which parts of their home are losing heat the fastest, improving their experience with a heat pump and its operation. But our differentiation against things like Tado or Nest, etc., is going to be tough to market. It's an expensive way to go to market, B2C as well, and that actually this unlocks benefits for an installer as well. So we actually started to speak to installers about how this might speed up their installation process, and we realized that there's as much, if not more, value initially to the installer. This unlocks this distressed purchase market for them, and it's a way for our significantly higher COGS than a Nest, which is this big, and we've got substantially more hardware that goes in the home, to be hidden within a big upfront cost of an installation. So for us, it was about understanding the entire market, understanding the value to the various stakeholders, and then just trying to think about which way is going to be the quickest and easiest for us to get some revenue on the board. Yeah.
So I was wondering if you had any more kind of general insights on achieving product market fit in the climate tech space.
Well, I mean, I would say it's the wrong question in a sense, because which I know sounds provocative, but you need what is the magic of startups? The magic of startups is that you do a first stage, which is figuring out, have I identified an opportunity that's worth building, right? So it doesn't feel like building a company. It feels like a detective story, right? You're just kind of like looking for the clues, looking for the proof points, and you never get 100% proof points. It's always like suggestive proof points, right? That tell you, yeah, we might be on the right track. Only when you've got enough of those proof points lined up do you start saying, okay, now we're actually going to put a real MVP, even just like before an MVP, just a statement to the market, we think we can do X. If we do that, will you be on board with us? And then you go on a journey with that first customer, that early customer, and try to find, you want to find a customer who's willing to teach you how to please them to the extent that you can get a second customer and a third, and then eventually you reach product market fit, right? So it's quite product market fit to me is like, 2 years into the journey, or in that neighborhood. So it's about finding the right team and the right kind of clues to the opportunity to go and navigate that to get there.
I actually have two caveats that further even complicate what you said, and this will sound a bit daunting. Like one, when you're trying to confirm your assumptions, like this is what we think is a solution. Human beings are incredibly capable of falling in love with their own ideas. Okay?
Yes.
And they will find confirmation bias. They'll go and seek out data, Google customers who will tell you that I need this and this wants to exist. And they're going to fight people on stage saying, I need this. 2 years into the business, you find no revenue because actually you were wrong. There were exactly 5 people. Okay. So the thing is, how do you not fall in love with your idea? Now this, I'm going to nuance this further. Now in climate tech, this is further, one step further. Not only are people incredibly passionate about the ideas, which is why we left really good careers, we were all in to do this, because we care about this so much. So there's a lot of passion, therefore more bias in our own heads. Also remember the people that you're going to try to sell to have an evolving landscape of their own. For example, since it's climate tech we're talking about, a lot of the work happens with governments, B2G. So what's your TAM? 10 governments? 154? 30? Where's the product market fit? Like Oman said, no, we'll go to Saudi. They said, no, we'll go to England. Can you even do that? Because a part of the market is what you're creating. So climate tech is incredibly hard, where you have to fight with your own bias, yet create a market that doesn't exist, yet fit into an existing market. Now simplifying all of that, when I'm speaking to any of the entrepreneurs I mentor these days, I say just think of 2 sets. One is the person who most needs it, the entity, and the other is who's most likely to pay for it. They're not usually the same. Yeah. And if you find an intersection of both, even though it's niche beachhead, that's the one to go for. It's the same even if you have 20 governments to sell to. If there are 2 of them that overlap into that, start with those 2. It's a bit logical and simpler. But again, remember, if you're going to continue confirmation bias and not talk to people who are devil's advocate of your idea, you keep on falling in love with every set of assumptions, and it's a big problem.
You want to be a scientist and say success looks like disconfirmation rather than confirmation.
Yeah, always be very good friends with people who completely challenge and rip your theory to shreds and completely destroy your ego. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's really amazing. It's very good for a founder to have very low ego, and these kind of people will do that for you. So don't ask your friends, is this a good idea, or family? They're going to be, yeah, it's great. Like, go to the person who always criticizes you the most, and then tell them. They'll find 500 holes in it that didn't even exist. And you're like, yeah, I love that. If you can do that, you've got thick skin, you're ready.
And it will prepare you for all your pitches as well, and VC questions.
Yeah. And I mean, I kind of slightly, yes, I'd slightly disagree, because
Okay.
it's like, yes, you really want that, you want feedback that means something, and that typically means going to people who don't just have an opinion, but have experience of whatever it is that you're talking about. But a lot of people, the way they go on in the world is like, hey, if I'm slightly provocative, there's like 10-15% of people, the way they make relationships is by being slightly negative and provocative towards the other person, and then kind of engaging them, through that, right? So you've got to be able to tell the difference between somebody who is there, it's just their habit to kind of say, what you're not thinking about is, as opposed to somebody who's really, being
Critical and thorough.
Critical in a helpful way.
I don't know what that is. Like, if you're critical, you're going to be brutal, and that's needed. I'm sorry, I'm a bit more Valley style, Dragon's Den type of person. I feel like if you're going to be brutal, because if you can't take it now, what are you going to do next 10 years in the market when you're going to be ripped every day publicly? So that's kind of more my style, a bit more brutal. But in general, I think product market fit is incredibly hard as a concept. Mm-hmm. And then you add a climate solution on top of that and make it nuanced. It just further complicates things. Overall, I'd say, just look at who's most likely to need it versus who's most likely to pay for it. And if there's an intersection, that's your sweet spot.
Thank you so much. Phyllis, I just wanted to ask you, because you work with so many different ventures, do you have do you currently have certain areas where you're really excited about that space and you feel there's a lot of impact that can be had through a venture in that space?
It's Joyeeta has already answered this question in a way, because the point is that entrepreneurs should be thinking about what's going to be relevant in 3 to 5 years, right? And that's, I'm just going to go back to my reference to Moore's Law, because Moore's Law makes that easy, right? Because you can or relatively easy, because you can say, right, so if computing power is 1/8 the cost or let's say 8 times as powerful as it is now. What will we be able to do then that we can't do now? And you sort of, you have that kind of target to aim at. If you're if you're doing it the right way, Joyeeta's way, and you're aiming 5 years out, then I would say food is absolutely, there's a huge carbon implication, major problems to be solved that are not anything to do with decarbonisation. They're to do with the fact that we're destroying the topsoil of the world at an astonishing rate. So when you're an entrepreneur, you hear major problem, you should go, oh, major problem, wow, the bigger the problem, the better. That means that's where the opportunity is. If you're more like, I need to chase, I'm against the school of thought that says, let's look at what's getting funded and go after that. Because it's like, well, the people who started on that road 2 years ago,
got us to where we are today,
they're
so I don't
going to
want
be
to
the
follow
ones,
their cue.
Yeah, they're the ones who started, who correctly predicted what was going to be the hot space now, but they started 2 years ago. Those are the ones that are going to win in that space. So you need to kind of be in a kind of anti-cyclical mindset to some extent. I mean, it's fair to say that built environment would be my second kind of target area, which it is seen as low-hanging. Well, regulators see built environment as low-hanging fruit, right? They say, well, you haven't built the building yet, so we can put lots of rules on you to make sure that you go in a green direction. And so there's almost a panic in lots of built environment companies around, oh God, what are we going to do? These regulations are seeming to get tougher, and we're therefore open to lots of experiments that are a bit speculative, and that's quite fertile ground for an entrepreneur. But I mean, if you go into a space, you get the right team together, there are problems everywhere.
Yeah. I just want to add finance and economics to that, because I feel like that's the mother of all engines. That's what kind of incentivized the system that brought us to the crisis. Therefore, if you can disrupt that, it might, wherever the money flows is where the solution flows. So I'm a big fan personally of investing into financial disruptions and green investing. Because if you can have more early stage capital, PE, bank loans, funds, credits, consumer incentives, behavior-based financing, all sorts of things that incentivize an economy that isn't entirely Adam's hand, but is also moving towards green, I would fund that disruption, because to me it seems like it's the disruption that disrupts everything else, that can fund everything else. So that's something that I personally look at. And I would imagine that should be a big one. And of course, superbly biased, but I do think blue carbon is pretty big, just because 70% of the world is oceans and it's completely untapped. So,
just to second finance, I mean, what we saw with PAYGo solar in Africa is that the exact same product, when sold on cash, you would get less than 1% of the sales than with a financing solution. And I think what we'll see in the built environment, and we're seeing it in heat pumps as well, is that kind of financing for understanding the financial life of the consumer and giving them a financial solution that unlocks this for them. It's going to be the vehicle to real scale.
I
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. We'll now open it up for questions from the audience.
I just have a quick question about funding sources. So, when you start at climate tech, who is easier? What funding sources do you look for? Is it angel investors?
So, do you want to go? Chris, go there. Because he's made a fund. He's going to fund you.
No. You go. I'm not going to fund you. No, I'm not funding early stage startups
In theory, I have to
anymore.
fund.
And that's Carbon 13's job. I'm doing something else now.
I would say that for deep climate tech, where it's a bit deeper, you're looking at the scientific level of the disruption, or a deep tech, that's a longer incubation time. I'm a big fan of grants, because they're non-dilutive and they will give you that. Grants also have a strategy, as I just spent some time in the EMBA class speaking just an hour ago with Chris. grants aren't like, people think like I applied for grants, I never got it. If you apply for 1.5 million when you're 3 months old, you're not going to get it. Grants also have a strategy, 50K, 150, 350, 500, 1.5. You have to step up. But grants really get you there. They're non-dilutive and you get IP support if you are able to manage it all well. I'm also a big fan of alternative forms of funding because all VCs won't get you there. They're not there, they don't have the thesis. Those who have it, half of them don't understand it. They've made up a thesis, but it's not actually green. So maybe look at low rate of interest loans if you have inventory against that. All of that is a bit further into the journey, but it's possible. We do, like I said, subsidiaries. We work with blended finance. We work at project finance, which is financing different sites separately on a P&L basis instead of a company level equity basis, individual. So there are many things. You have to think of finance creatively if you're climate tech. If you're going to be like, I'm seed Series A, then I'm going to be in the cover of TechCrunch and become a unicorn, then you should just make a normal tech company. Climate finance isn't going to follow that route. And if you don't want to be diluted, you should look at all these other forms as well. There are a few VCs. They definitely do climate finance. They have a bit more patient capital. But that is like a drop in the ocean of VCs. The others will come meet with you, fill up their deal flow, but they're actually never going to invest in you. So think about it creatively, how you're going to engage with that. This is really important because this is the fuel that goes into the company. People don't think about it and they run out of logs in the middle of winter and everyone freezes. That's really what happens.
Or they get poison logs, but that's another story.
That's another story. So be very careful about that theory. Don't be afraid, jump into it, but be open to flexibility and don't think about I'm going to be on the cover of TechCrunch for raising a 50 million Series A. That's a SaaS company. It's not us. So
I would, just to add to that, I would say you've got to ask yourself the question of how fast you want to grow and how hard are you willing to fall, because you've spoken really well about the other various routes, but if you are just looking at the kind of VC/angel funding route, kind of more traditional, VCs are always going to push you to grow.
Yeah.
They want to invest more and more money in you, and if you're not going to be a $100 million exit or more, then you're not that interesting. So they prefer that you burn out quickly and fail. Whereas if you do have the opportunity to raise a little bit through angels, grants here and there.
Green angel funds, syndicates, things like that. And also, I just find generally, I know this is going to sound common sense, but you'll be surprised how many people forget in the journey. I've done it in some of my past avatars. Be reasonable when you spend. So spend enough to grow your company at the speed you want, but people do ridiculous expenditures. They don't look at their P&L. I tell a CEO that if you're not looking at it every Friday before you hit the end of the week, I look at it every day, by the way. I look at every day before sleeping. If you're not looking at every penny, which is what I do, you can stretch it and make it go a long way because the world is full of incentives. You can get free cloud credits, you can get free this, you can get MailChimp, this, that. If you're careful about how to make your money run, you won't need that much capital. But if you're going to be like, I'm just keeping on raising VC capital, everyone's going to get a pool table, this is Google, there's free food every day, you're going to run out. We have to be frugal because the system isn't incentivizing to solve the biggest problem right now on the planet. If we're going to solve it, we're going to have to do it with very little resources, and you're going to have to stretch them. So if climate tech companies are not super lean, even leaner than any other startup,
I would just add, if you're a first-time founder, you really need good mentors and advisors on this exact subject, right? It's so... and the problem is that there's a lot of people who know that you as a first-time founder need that help, and they get you because they come in and they say, well, I know this world and I've been through this world, and I will take care of this. I will give you the right advice at the right time, and just trust me, right? Well, generally, not always, but generally that means that person has a friend who is desperate for things to invest in. And what they mean by I'm going to help you at the right time is I'm going to funnel you in the direction of a particular investor and try to take your choice away, right? So you need the right kind of advisors who are not in it for themselves, or not, maybe you have to think about how to make sure that they're incentivized in a way that's aligned with you, but who are opening your eyes and opening up your options rather than saying, just let me be your Svengali and sort of channel you in a particular direction. Because, the early choices that you make, like who you take money from, and how much equity giveaway and all these things. Every year in September when the new MBA class comes in, I get some people knocking on my door who say, okay, I've got this great idea, I've built this, it's really going well. And then I say, okay, what's your cap table look like? And they've made some stupid decision to give somebody, too big of a share in the business just because that seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And basically I have to look at them and say, I'm really sorry, unless you can persuade that person to reassess, it's already dead, and you should kill it. You should kill it now and start with a fresh slate rather than try to persevere through the fact that you made this bad decision. Each stage you have to get it. Like, I'm not saying there's no room for error, but you really have to get it right at each stage.
And I've lost an entire business to this because I wasn't careful. Entire profit-making, highly impactful business that went away because of several cascading things. But the fundamental thing is what he said. In the first 2 rounds, I didn't think enough. It was like the world pushes you to take capital and it's all about glamour. You've raised so much from so-and-so. And you kind of think that's the metric. It's not. The main metric is always going to be value creation. Doesn't matter whether you're WeWork, raising 8 billion going bust, or if you're tiny and you've done amazing stuff like Patagonia, who's now donated 1 billion to the world. You always have to be careful about who you raise it from, how much you raise it, and what's the strategy. Think about it from day one. And if you don't know how to think about it, read blogs, go to podcasts, like meet up with people, speak to advanced entrepreneurs who've done it many times. Make it like an intuitive knowledge. You know how fundraising works. Doesn't matter what's your background. If you understand that blueprint of how fundraising works, it becomes a knowledge that I think every founder in any role needs. Even if you're a tech co-founder, you ought to know that. If you have that, the company becomes unbeatable. Because you know the biggest engine that runs the company's economics, and you can handle that.
Yeah, most things I would say just-in-time learning is fine, but on the financial strategy over your first 3-4 rounds, you need the right advisors, and you need them to be very open with you and teach you rather than try to cover your eyes.
Great.
Thank you so much. Celia, I saw your question.
Yes, your question. You asked first. Yeah, sorry, I remember.
Thanks so much. Great, really interesting. You mentioned that the US is the only carbon market kind of going on. What is blue carbon, first of all?
Okay. I will answer. So the US isn't the only blue carbon. The registries are global in the sense that anybody can register and buy and sell carbon on it, but they're predominantly headquartered in US and quite a lot of them in San Fran. So I was in San Fran in Air Miners just a few months ago, being in an accelerator that helped me get into that market, and it's also where I'm mostly from. So it's still very dominated there because remember, that's where the biggest buyers are. The biggest data centers, the AWS, the Apples of the world, they're buying. The airlines are buying, manufacturing are buying, but those people, the tech people, are way more active. So that's where the buyers are. And you always want to be close to buyers, like Wise FinTech in New York, Tokyo, and London. You want to be close to buyers, right? So it's a lot orientated there, but let me be honest, it's global. So the people fulfilling the credits, like us, we're not there, we're elsewhere. So they could be buying credit from somebody in Namibia, like Kelp Blue. That's run by a very good friend Caroline. They sell millions of credits and green bonds to US buyers. So they can be anywhere, but US is a bit more, US private market is a bit more active. The second thing was blue carbon. So there's blue carbon and then there's land-based carbon. Land-based carbon is basically all the carbon stories you hear, trees, this and that, whatever. Blue carbon is what the ocean absorbs and captures. And blue carbon, by number, is actually way bigger than land-based carbon for many reasons. And a lot of it is because it's the biggest heat sink in the world, 90%, but also CO2. It takes an outstanding amount of carbon in. And that's a lot of the micro and the macro algae and the life forms. They have a whole system of how they harness that carbon and become a thing. So if you are able to amplify blue carbon, and this is not just me, I obviously have a bias because I'm in that market. The reason blue carbon is in high demand and less supply is because it is supposed to be, in perception, a bit more valuable than land-based carbon because the co-benefits are a lot. For instance, in our farm, the biggest carbon is the amount of carbon our seaweed captures. And then so every carbon is capture, stabilize, sequester, right? So we capture with the seaweed. Stabilization is there itself. Sequestration, how do we store it for X number of years. So that X number of years goes from 0 years to 100 years to 1,000. If anything is stored for less than 100 years, you don't get carbon credits issued. The permanence of the process should be 100 year plus, right? If you're 30, 40 years, I'm going to store the carbon, then it goes back. So you can't say that I just made a meat substitute burger, therefore give me, because it's in the short carbon cycle. 100 year plus is when you can actually get paid for the credits. So that's like actually storing carbon. There is one process that has got into a bit of controversy, which is actually what running tide and seaweed generation do. They grow a lot of seaweed, then they harvest and drop it at very deep oceans. So it sinks, and so they claim that it goes into 1,000-year carbon cycle. It's not entirely wrong. The ocean is remarkably stratified and it moves at that speed. The problem is it doesn't always reach there. It hits a lot of fish bodies, etc. that is not fully monitored. So if it gets stuck and rots, then you're creating methane, which is 4 times CO2e. So it's a bit of a problem. They've gotten into a bit of a controversy. That's one process of sequestration. The processes we use, other than selling biomass directly, which is not a carbon process, we do it because it's good for the environment and employment. The carbon credits we generate are because of biocharring or bio-oil, which is 2 processes where we take that, we dry it, we put it in pyrolysis or thermolysis, and then you have carbon, literal black carbon that you can measure. So you know for every acre, this much biomass came out, this much was water, this is what incinerated it. By the way, I can now store this black powdered sooty carbon for 100 plus years. Therefore,
Underground, or where do you put it?
Yes. So there are companies that will do it for you called CCUS, but at the moment, that's what we're going with. What happens in 100 years? Does carbon actually leak out of containers or anything like that? Well, the hope is from what we know about the carbon structure, that's not the case. But no one really knows. We could be totally wrong, but this is the best bet we got right now. So we're trying it. So this is the blue carbon that we're selling, the carbon credits. I'm going to sequester 100 tons for you. Will you please pay me per ton, whatever? And they're like, I'm adding 100 tons per year. You're going to take out 100 tons there, so I'll pay you. That's how offset works. They're adding, they're offsetting. Blue carbon is the process of getting this sequestration from the ocean. And non-blue carbon is the trees and everything else on the planet. Why blue carbon is more expensive or preferable in some cases is because while you're growing the blue carbon, you're actually doing a lot of biodiversity and employment and coastal community empowerment. Like all our farms, they have baby otters and baby seals, turtles coming by just because it's floating. And so it has it reduces ocean acidification, reduces ocean eutrophication. It takes in all bleached nitrates because it needs that to grow. And it becomes a natural fertilizer, NPK, that you can use in your trees if you like. So basically there's so much co-benefits that even though the main thing is carbon, blue carbon actually means all that is happening, plus the coastal people get employment, which are the first people that are going to get hit when the ocean water rises. If they don't have any gas in the tank, they cannot emigrate. They will just get on a boat and there'll be civil wars because no one will take 300 million people. So blue carbon has all those connotations that we really like, which is why it makes it quite expensive. So we say well, you are going to pay $200 per ton, but you should pay us $600 because we're doing all this other stuff as well. And they pay. Whereas in land-based carbon, the price is the price. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Chris, do you have to...
I have to go.
Oh,
That's okay. Chris, thank you so much for joining.
We had one last question from him.
Okay. It was fairly simple. It was just...
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Bye. See you.
Great to see
You're
you.
not going to have dinner?
No.
Okay, fine.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions, but we'll take them together so that we can...
We had 2 here. One
Yeah,
here, and
I
I
saw
think
your
he
hand
raised his
last
hand in
time
the
as well.
first queue there.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't notice that. I'll take these 2 then.
Okay. Well, mine was a fairly simple one. It was just you guys as entrepreneurs. How do you deal with failure?
Oh my God.
Okay, let's just take Anil before we... What's...
So we were discussing earlier about advisor, and I was wondering, how do you find the right advisor?
The right advisor?
Yes.
Okay.
Not from LinkedIn.
Yeah. Or I did find one great one on LinkedIn. It's like dating. How do you find the right advisor? God knows. Maybe Tinder is great. Maybe it isn't. Who knows, right? You've got to try and you've got to be lucky. My personal formula is I really need to click. I don't care how accomplished they are. If I'm not clicking, I don't actually clock anything. Like most humans, I'm blocked off. So I need to click. So yes, the table stakes is do they have the qualifications to be what I need the advisor in AI or monetarily or whatever. But I also need to be able to communicate and feel respected and be able to voice my opinion. And they like me as a person and give me holistic ideas. For me, that works. I know lots of people are not as screwed up as me. They can just work with anybody. They're great. You wanted to ask about failure. The answer to that is, I think for a long time, I dealt with it really badly. Like, as in, I got full-on depressed. I'm sorry I'm saying this on stage, not a good sell. But, it was like awful. Because it's very personal, the endeavor, and it comes from your heart and passion, and you identify. Like, there was a time in one of my companies, the name was XYZ, I don't want to name it, which when I used to go on stage, people would forget my name and say XYZ of Joyeeta, instead of Joyeeta of XYZ. That's how identified my name was with that brand. So, of course, when it fails, you feel like you failed. Like, my whole life came crashing. My income potential for 3 years that I didn't take a penny for, that I could have made money. All the people who lost their jobs, all the relationships I lost because I didn't go out and meet, all of that came crashing on my head. My parents were like, you didn't even come home for 3 Christmas, and this also didn't work. So, well, they didn't say it this way. I imagine they're saying it in their head. That's part of the problem. I was imagining it. People weren't thinking this, but I thought they were. So, dealt with it really badly. But progressively over time, I think working on dealing with that failure is exactly the same process as working on dealing with failure in anything. Sports, relationships, life, academics, it's the same. It's not entirely you. It's what happened in that moment when you were surrounded by various variables. Maybe it won't be the same again. It could be, but it's not because you failed. It's because it didn't work out, which is different from I failed. And I took that approach to everything else in life as well. So, the long story short, it sucks, because it's very personal. But if you can figure this failure out and take it in your stride, something so personal, it actually makes you remarkably good in your personal endeavors as well, because you carry that lesson. So entrepreneurship is a good way to become a good human. It's a brutal way. It's like you threw yourself to the sharks and you were like, eat me up. But if you can come out the other side with lessons, it does actually really help you in your personal growth.
Yeah, I think to echo that, it's going to be emotional. And as with personal life, etc., learning to kind of handle that emotion, not necessarily compartmentalize it, but to recognize it and to work through it and learn from it, it's just as important. Otherwise, you end up, from one, even a small failure, you can end up, spiraling with your colleagues, with your employees, and you need to be able to kind of stay balanced and steer the ship. And that comes from just learning from it and getting on with things.
I honestly think it's like a relationship. It really is, because it's so deeply personal. So if it fails, you do exactly what you ought to do in a deep relationship that didn't work. Take some time, process it, learn from it. Don't beat yourself down because it was a multi-people equation. Don't immediately move on to something else. Give some time, then come out with who you become as a person and see what life has to offer. Because it really feels like a relationship. That's how every endeavor is. It does. It's like your entire emotional identity gets entangled in it. It's easy for people to say, like, oh, it's just fine, and you move on. But like for an entrepreneur, that is the thing they did as opposed to every other thing they could have done those few years, personal and professional. But I think it's exactly like a relationship. You come out of it a better person. I mean, you could also be worse, but like, it's your choice. I think I've been worse a few times in relationships, but better here.
It's also a chance to reflect on whether it's worth fighting for in that moment, I think. And, assuming you do fight for it, it's, that's when you learn from it.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question if anybody has anything they'd like to ask.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I guess just on your experiences with like accelerators, like applying to accelerators, like for example, what advice would you give to someone, for example, in a pre-accelerator and looking to like further an idea into an accelerator, bringing along a team?
I mean, the first one is read the terms and make sure you're comfortable with them before you start. I think the other one is I think bringing an idea into an accelerator is a bit of a mixed bag. And I think my co-founder did this really well, in that he had an idea that he brought in, but didn't tell anyone it at all, and looked instead to find people that he gelled with and wanted to start a business with, and then exposed it to those people. There were other people on Carbon 13 that came with an idea, it's all they spoke about, and I don't think any of them ended up teaming in that process, because everyone came in with like wanting to conceive an idea together. So if you have your own idea and that you're saying, hey, do you want to join my team, you're kind of not offering them the full experience that they might have been looking for. So I think go into it and share it with people that after you've decided, oh, I might want to work with those people. But then again, if they say to you, I like parts of it, but maybe we should change this and that, you've got to be flexible if you want to come out of it with a team.
I think the only thing I'll add to that is that's if the venture builder part is included in the accelerator, where you build the venture with others and they want to build it. Quite a large number of accelerators like YC or Techstars or Founders Factory or, loads will actually not help you build the venture. You've already built it. They will help accelerate it. They're an accelerator that will take shares and will accelerate. What that means is they'll identify the key weak points, they'll introduce mentors, they'll give you some credits and clouds, and they'll keep you in the cohort and incubate you to the next step, basically. With that kind of an accelerator, it's really important what they bring. So what is it you need? If you think you're here, you want exposure to a US market, go to a US accelerator. If you think you need, you have climate tech, that's a lot about consumer behavior. Founders Factory is great. They're all about media and consumer. If you want deep tech and you're like thinking, wow, if I could also find, I don't know, a PhD to go along with me, another one, then Entrepreneurs First could be something. You could go to Zinc. You could go to Antler if you're like pre-idea. If it's purely climate, Carbon-13 is a good one. It really depends on if it's like already gone a little bit, it's got legs, but you're like, I want to blow this out of proportion. How big can this be? Let's see the global exposure. Techstars is not bad. So they're all various things, and they take decent stake. They're not cheap. Accelerators come with shares. I think for my venture, it was pretty clear none of them can help because like it's oceans and it's robotics, blue carbon. I mean, what will they accelerate? That's why Chris was saying in the last class, you guys weren't there, that Joyeeta said no, a day before Carbon-13. I was like, I don't want to do it. But it ended up being a good idea for me. So for me, these ones didn't help. But at the right time, right things can help. Like if I wanted to go to US this year, YC would be great for me. I don't, but I would have loved YC. At least I would have tried for sure. I'm a big fan of YC because end of the day, the club that funds YC can fund you forever. It's like an engine, right? So I'm a big fan of YC, and they have a climate track now. If you can somehow get some legs on your idea and then get into that, honestly, you have like access to the biggest pool of investors in this world and the deepest pockets. But again, it depends on what you want. Maybe you don't want to be on the cover of Wired and TechCrunch. That's not your ambition, wasn't mine. So then not YC. So think about all of that stuff. So in general, they're not superbly helpful if your idea is absolutely out of the box, because they accelerate according to an institution, right? But if it's somewhat in the box and you know what they're going to provide, then they're good. The only caution I have is don't go to, there's quite a few accelerators that have, come up. Every street has one. And they're going to take 3 to 5% and they're going to accelerate you. I'm sorry. The control doesn't show that. Like going to you, not going to you. Actually, I think it might be distracting, to be honest. So don't go to every Tom, Dick, and Harry open an accelerator. They're going to supercharge you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Just before we finish, for everyone in the room who either wants to found a startup in the climate tech space or
work with us, we're hiring. Did I say that? No? You heard it again.
or wants to work at an early stage startup.
Yes.
If there's one piece of advice you want them to leave with, what would that be? And briefly, because we've got the appointment.
I actually want to hear Luke's advice. It might be applicable for me too, so go for it.
I think as somebody who's come to this pretty late in terms of entrepreneurship, I think you're ready when you think you're ready. And I didn't think I was ready in my 20s. I wanted to learn more, but I know lots of people that were ready because they thought they were ready. Because you will learn everything you need to learn just through doing it, but fundamentally you need to have that confidence. So if you're thinking, oh, should I do this or not? I think I can do it. You can.
My piece of advice is you cannot learn swimming by correspondence. If you want to do it, just got to jump. You drown, you drown. If you think you're not courageous enough to drown, don't do it. I'm not even kidding. There's a time in your life when you can and you cannot. So what stage of life are you at? Please assess. It's a deeply personal endeavor. Can you really jump and be ready to drown if you can't swim? Then do it. But there's no way to just stand by the sides and try to experience it. You've got to jump in. And the second thing I would say is please don't forget, like every other endeavor, this is massively 90% luck as well. I have a friend who has a unicorn, and last week, he has an app that all of you have used. I promise you I'm talking of that guy. I don't want to name him. Last week, we found out completely out of the blue, after having had a brunch with all of us, when he went back home, he went for a routine eye check, and he found a large growth on the back of his head. So there's a lot of variables that affect people. You will not know it from the outside, why the company went down, why they don't talk, why the product failed, the product manager's wife was ill, or their parent died. You have no idea how many variables impact a company, as many as it affects any human, because it's only made of humans. So whatever you do, it will be subject to a lot of luck. That's not entirely in your control, which means you have a free pass to take the risk, basically, because it is end of the day luck. If you fail, just chill. Like, you did your best. If it didn't work, then I guess it didn't work. If you can take that attitude, do it. But if you think that you're not in a place in life you can take that amount of risk, please don't. Because it does cause an outstanding amount of distress to other people in your life. Entrepreneurship is a team game, and half of the team is your home, by the way. It's not just office. It's all those people you don't give time to for years. Parents, siblings, partners, kids, friends who'll never see you. It gets harder each month. You're not going to be present. You won't do all your duties. Financially, you'll be stretched unless you've had like prior exits or your dad is funding you, which is some entrepreneurs I know. But I'm just saying, in general, it's not the best thing if you don't make payroll for 3 years, which is going to be entrepreneurship. You'll make very little money for a very long time. It's mentally very harrowing, so mental health gets affected. So there's lots of people in your life who depend upon you, and you depend upon them, and you may not be in a position to disappoint them. So think about that. If you don't take stock of your personal life before you jump into entrepreneurship, you're making your life infinitely harder. Because when they suffer immensely, you're going to suffer. It's going to impact you. So make sure you're on a journey where you're supported, or at least there are neutral people. Not like, oh my God, don't do that. This is not the best time to do it. And it's probably time to have a chat with them. So please take a stock of personal situations. I think it shouldn't be so much with all of you. You're all super young, so you can just go do it. Like, I think it should be fine to take a risk at this point.
Yeah, I think that's what really insightful advice to end on. Thank you so much for what's been a really, really interesting and fascinating conversation, and I'm sure all of us learned a lot from it. Everybody, please join me in thanking our speakers.